Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news, which as usual has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. With any luck, you're having an amazing day. Unfortunately, I'm not on camera for this video, but by golly gosh, there have been some really interesting developments in the world of technology the past day or so. And we're going to start things out with the RX 5500. Despite this card being officially announced by AMD in early October, we are still waiting for the darn thing to launch. Several websites have procured OEM versions of the GPU for a performance preview/review, but we don't even have pricing information of this GPU or even an official release date up until now, potentially. According to website IT Home, AMD have decided to brief AIBs that they can release their custom cards featuring the RX 5500 on the 12th of December. So that's basically 2 months after the card was initially announced, which is, well, honestly kind of crazy. Now, this card is most likely going to replace the RX 580/590, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the reasons AMD have chosen to delay the GPU. Indeed, AMD have sent press, in fact I've received a couple of the emails, several reminders that the RX 580/590 series is really good value, and it is. I mean, they're still really good cards, and given that AMD seemed intent to replace the RX 580/590 with the RX 5500 series, we can probably guess that the cards are going to be retailing at around the $150 mark. I mean, honestly, it can't be much more than that, since these GPUs are going to be competing with NVIDIA's GTX 1650 Super and GTX 1650 and so on. And obviously with the performance results we've seen, Tech Power Up managed to grab hold of one of these GPUs, and Heist.de, and I've kind of gone into those results previously. But the cards basically are around on par with the GTX 1650 Super. As for the specifications of the GPU, there's still a little bit of confusion of what's going on with the XT versions. Some people think that they may be for Apple products only, but others are insisting that they will release for the general PC market. We don't really know, unfortunately, which is also a cause of contention. Honestly, AMD are being really obscure with the whole Radeon RX 5500, unusually so. But anyway, with the vanilla 5500, it has 1408 shaders and clocks in at 1845 MHz for the boost frequency, although game clock is 1717 MHz. Once again, these cards are an excellent value proposition if you want to stick to AMD's ecosystem. And now we have several stories from Intel. Unfortunately for Intel, not all of these stories are very positive, and I'm being rather kind when I say that. The first of which is that Dell and other companies are starting to respond to a letter that Intel issued themselves, apologising for CPU shipment delays, despite the fact that it has actually increased its own manufacturing capacity of its 14nm CPUs by 25% during 2019. But still, demand is still outpacing supply. Furthermore, Intel has experienced production variability in the fourth quarter, and obviously, well, we all know what's going on with 10nm, so I'm not even going to bother to mention that. According to Jeffrey Clark, who is the COO of Dell, well, he's less than impressed. Intel CPU shortages have worsened quarter over quarter. The shortages are now impacting commercial PC and premium consumer PC Q4 forecasted shipments, end quote. And as I mentioned, other companies have actually commented on this as well, including the co-CEO of Asus, who said the Intel CPU shortage began in Q4 of last year and has continued throughout Q1 of this year. In Q2 and Q3 of this year, the situation is easing, and the messaging from our partner tells us that in Q4 we will still face shortage. This is not something that's unique to Asus and affects the entire PC industry. As for 202, currently the information transparency allows us to know that Q1 will have we will not have CPU shortage, although there's not enough transparency for Q2 because this situation that has continued from Q4 of last year, end quote. There's also news on the back of this from Pulse News in Korea that Intel will be asking Samsung to produce its CPUs. And they've said obviously that this is to offset the fact that Intel themselves are just having issues manufacturing the numbers that are needed, particularly on the 14nm process. Unfortunately, they don't really go into a great deal of detail. They have mentioned that it could potentially even be for Rocket Lake, but the thing is, this is not the first time we've heard this. It was like mid this year that this rumour was also swirling around. I'm personally very skeptical that this is the case because, as many of you are aware, when you design a CPU, it is specifically for your manufacturing facility. Intel obviously manufactures its own processors, and Samsung's fabrication facilities would not necessarily just easily be able to translate to Intel's own CPUs. Of course, there is potentially a possibility that upcoming CPUs from Intel could be designed specifically for Samsung, although there is no evidence that this is the case. The fact is that CPU design cycles are multi-year. They're not like, oh, we can quickly change this design in a couple of minutes, give me a moment, I just need to fire up Adobe Illustrator. It doesn't work like that in the slightest. Not to mention that Intel themselves may be a bit concerned that they would be providing proprietary information to Samsung. And Intel, once again, just to reiterate, is designing its 14nm processors around its own specific nodes. So basically they are locked in to that manufacturing process. 14nm is not just 14nm, just like 28nm is not just 28nm. There are some specific differences in the way that each one is created. And so I'm not saying it's not true, I would just be extremely dubious that it's true. And now from Intel's CPUs to Intel's GPUs, because we have more bad news for Intel, and that is that both Chris Hook and Heather Lennon have both left Intel Graphics. They seem to have only been there weeks, but in reality, Chris Hook himself left Team Radeon back in April of 2018 as a marketing lead, and Heather Lennon actually departed a year later, funnily enough. She left in April of 2019, and she was the senior manager of digital marketing. Wow, I really couldn't say that. They are not the only major losses that Intel have faced. We have seen John Carville move to Nuvia, which is a CPU startup. It's actually founded by ex-Apple engineers, and they are looking to be competitive in the data center. As you are likely aware, it is Thanksgiving in the United States right now, which means people aren't so focused on work. But nevertheless, Chris did take to Twitter to confirm his departure from Intel Graphics, and also added that Heather would be leaving as well. It's going to be interesting to see what happens at Intel now Chris and Heather are leaving the company, and what changes to marketing that Intel Graphics will face. Unfortunately, we know very little official information about the gaming GPUs, which is going to launch in 2020. I'm hearing an awful lot of mixed things, but supposedly the GPUs will be up to mid-range in terms of performance, although obviously Intel are keeping rather quiet on that. But the year after that, the GPUs will launch for supercomputers and a lot of other usage scenarios as well. And, well, we started with Intel's CPUs. Let's move back to them, shall we? This time it's Intel's Rocket Lake S, because there is a very interesting leak that was discovered by Momomo on Twitter. And it's from a well-known leaker that posts on Chinese forums. And they have been quite accurate in the past, to my knowledge, and they are giving a whole lot of information concerning Intel's Rocket Lake, which is not going to launch in 2020, of course, it's going to launch in 2021. The reason I put it in such a way is because Comet Lake launches next year, And here's where things get really interesting. Comet Lake is a 10-core processor, well, up to 10 cores, of course, and features hyper-threading on just about every single SKU, which isn't surprising given what AMD are doing with the Ryzen 3000 series. However, Rocket Lake S is very interesting. I can't say it any other way, because it features up to 8 CPU cores, but still 125 watts. However, it's also featuring a Generation 12 iGPU with up to 32 execution units. We also see an improvement in the memory controller, supporting DDR4 2933. So there are several things which I find super interesting about this. For one, they are stating that it's a 14nm GPU, but, well, 8 processor cores. Okay. So why? I mean, why are they going from 10 CPU cores to 8 processor cores? Now, bear in mind that there was a roadmap that was leaked earlier on this year, and this roadmap actually did seem to indicate that Rocket Lake will feature up to 10 CPU cores. So there's a couple of theories. The first is that this leak's wrong, or plans have changed, or the other option is this roadmap is inaccurate. Personally, I wouldn't be surprised if the plans have changed. So things are a bit conflicting, because if you look at the AVX support, it's listed as 256-bit, which would indicate that it's Skylake based, right? Given what we know about the other architectures. I mean, you can see 512 right there for Ice Lake. Then again, just about everything else here seems to indicate that it's not Skylake. I mean, it would make absolutely zero sense for Intel to release a product which is 8 cores based on the Skylake architecture in 2021. Then again, even the 10-core version that we had rumoured before would still really not make any sense. I was told it was a backport. I was told it was a backport of Sunny Cove. That was a video I made quite a while ago, a couple of months ago. But I'm even doubting that it could be Sunny Cove, because Sunny Cove in 2021 with only with 8 CPU cores, I don't really know. Bear in mind that at that point, Intel would presumably be facing at least Zen 3 from AMD. There's an awful lot of questions coming in from Rocket Lake, and honestly, I think we're just going to have to wait and see how it all goes. I would be very curious, though, how Intel intends to compete in the desktop market for that. I think they've really got caught with their pants down by AMD, and now they're just kind of like, well, the best is what we can do. Then again, we don't know what enhancements they're making to the CPU cores for Rocket Lake. So maybe when it comes to workloads which aren't extremely multi-threaded, maybe Rocket Lake could be absolutely monstrous, particularly with decent IPC gains and clock frequency enhancements. Unfortunately, this is just one of those things where we're going to have to just scratch our heads, because there is so much conflicting information regarding Rocket Lake and what it potentially could be. I'm going to be fascinated, though, over the next year to see what happens from both AMD and Intel. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you did, then the normal stuff. Like, share, comment and subscribe, because it helps us out a ton. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.